Remember when Democrats were furious with Republicans for saying that Biden's cognitive abilities were not up to snuff? Well, it was much worse, as top aides feared he could actually die in office, and they started prepping for a replacement as early as 2023. According to the new bombshell book, Fight Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House, authors Amie Parnes and Jonathan Allen detail the race for the Democratic nomination in 2024 and much more.
The book blows the cover off inner secrets, including then Vice President Kamala Harris begging Biden for his swift endorsement once he stepped away.
Daily Caller White House correspondent Reagan Reese posted an excerpt on X, writing an aide to former Vice President Kamala Harris carried a spreadsheet of Republican federal judges Trump hadn't appointed, so if Harris needed to be sworn in on short notice, it could be from someone seen as more credible to Republicans. They wrote. Her reaction was, is right. Joining us now to reveal more from their already best-selling book. I have it right here. Check it out. Today are Amie Parnes, a senior political reporter with The Hill, and Jonathan Allen, senior national reporter for NBC News. Love having guests in studio always. It is so much more fun. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, let's start with the big, one of the scoops I saw from your book being discussed on social media, that Democrats were seriously preparing a what-if scenario if Biden, couldn't make it to the finish line?
Yeah, the DNC was preparing for the inevitability of what if this happened. As we just noted, Jamal Simmons, who was Kamala Harris's communications director, carried a spreadsheet with him every time he traveled. He had this idea, he thought that, that moment should be validated by a Republican judge, that it would be worth more, if you will, to Republicans. And so I think that that's sort of how a lot of the planning came to be. And this is all stuff that we reported first in this book.
Jonathan, I think one of the biggest questions, not just among the media commentary class, but just the American people, is who knew? At what level did you have to be? Clearly, the press secretary and the vice president had to have some knowledge of Biden not being as capable of answering questions or knowing where he was or whatever it is. How far down the list of Democratic officials does that go? Were you able to get insights into how senior he had to be to know? Because all those people even deny that they kind of knew anything, right? That's the.
You're absolutely right. Who knew what when? The age-old question. And we do get some answers here. Part of this is a little bit of a frog boiling in water, right? Mm-hmm. That there's not, for people who see him every day, it's not as dramatic of a shift as it is for people who see him once every couple of months. But there was a cocoon around him of top people who really didn't allow anybody else in. The First Lady, the White House Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients, the senior advisors to Biden, Tom Donilon and Mike Ricchetti. Those guys, Steve Ricchetti, those guys kept him from view of even a lot of other White House officials. What Amie and I report in this book for the first time is a number of episodes where people who were the second tier out or the third tier out started to notice serious problems with Biden. Eric Swalwell, the congressman from California, who had run against Biden in the 2020 Democratic primary, goes to the White House in the summer of 2023, and he's talking to the president, and it becomes clear the president doesn't recognize him. Swalwell has to cue him.
Well, he's a kind of forgettable, standard issue Democratic white guy. No.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I feel like most people who pay a modicum of attention to politics know who Eric Swalwell is. He's on TV every once in a while. And certainly the guy that ran against him, Joe Biden, would know who he was, or should have known who he was. There was an episode also in 2023. Biden gets up and wanders off the set in the middle of an interview with Nicole Wallace on MSNBC.
Right.
The interview kind of wraps, but she hadn't gone to commercial yet, and he just gets up. It'd be like if I just got up and kind of wandered off here.
We hope you don't do that.
Later that day, so people noticed that, and that went viral. Later that day, there's a fundraiser at this posh New York hotel, and Biden is speaking to donors, and he just freezes. And one of the people who attended that event, it was confided to us, thought to themselves, he might die. This is not in a good place. So there were certainly indications to a lot of people that there were problems, and I think the closer to Biden you got, the more likely you were to know that there was something wrong with him, and the less likely you were to talk to anybody else about it.
There were other details too,
right.
when he went to a small fundraiser, fluorescent tape on the floor to guide him where he needs to go. On foreign trips, there's a makeup artist who comes in first thing in the morning to kind of liven him up and do his makeup ahead of these meetings. He wasn't doing television, he was going into meetings. The first thing was to bring in this makeup artist to help him. And all of this we reveal in the book for the first time.
Fluorescent tape?
Yes, and
To show him where to go at a fundraiser at Governor Phil Murphy's house. So a small place, and it's like fluorescent tape on the floor pointing him where to go in a house. And when he goes to speak to the donors outside, he's got a teleprompter. He's and a podium. In this small patio area. That night they go in for this private dinner, and he's talking about Ukraine, and he's kind of making sense, and then he starts trailing off. And this happens repeatedly, where he's kind of doing well and then trailing off. And finally, Biden sort of realizes what's going on himself and says, you guys don't want to wait anymore for your dinner. I guess I'm gonna shut up now. But you have to read the book to get all of the episodes. Otherwise, we could take up the next 24 hours on Rising.
How early, I'm curious, did that fluorescent tape type of instance, how early was that? Were we talking about, 2 years ago? When did that type of, because I sense a lot of fear and anxiety from his team and from those close to him when I was reading that, and I thought there was a whole groundswell of what is going to happen if, and that's a lot of pressure on the team themselves.
Yeah, and we report in this book, it was happening much earlier. In 2022, for example, there was an instance where he's guiding a group around the White House, and he's showing them into like weird, obscure places like the locker room, and he's asking, do you want to go outside? And Jill Biden's like, no, they don't want to go outside. So we review.
A lot of protection.
There is a lot of protection.
Yeah.
Going on.
And in that case, Kevin McCarthy, the former Speaker of the House, was with him and sort of decided as he's wandering around with the president, and it's actually the family of the late Jackie Walorski, a congresswoman from Indiana, who President Biden had mistakenly shouted out to at an event after she had died. He said, "Jackie, where are you, Jackie?" And so then he invited her family as kind of an apology to the White House. So they're wandering around the White House grounds, and McCarthy is thinking to himself, I have to play staffer here and manage the president and kind of make sure he gets back inside okay. And he goes out to his car that night, McCarthy, and he's sitting in his car and he's thinking, my God, this guy has lost it. This is so sad for the country.
So let's move forward to the most probably consequential presidential debate that has ever taken place. And the American people are watching it. They're seeing for the first time, some of them, how bad it's gotten for Biden. How does the campaign staff react internally? Is it a slow burn of, well, that went worse than we thought, or but because they're so proximate to him, they like it's the frog boiling in water, or are they like, crap, it's all over? How did they react?
It was a slow burn for them, but everyone else within the Democratic orbit was going crazy. We take you inside Nancy Pelosi's living room. She's sitting there fielding texts from all kinds of people, donors, lawmakers. Donors and lawmakers are on their own chains, like going crazy about what's happening. They can't believe what's happening in front of their eyes. We take you inside Jim Clyburn's living room. He's sitting there having a drink alone. All of these lawmakers watching alone. It's almost as if they knew that a train wreck was about to happen and they couldn't all convene together.
Because normally they would be at a debate watch party.
Right.
But all of these senior Democrats are just sitting at home watching alone. They can't bear the thought of being in a public place where they're going to have to defend whatever comes out. And then Joe Biden comes out, and it's much worse than they even thought it might be.
Yeah.
As far as his campaign staff, I think they were in denial. They're all getting hit with the same kinds of text messages, just people freaking out. And their job, as it has been all along, is to protect Joe Biden. And so they go out there with their talking points, pretending that something normal had just happened, or, it was a bad night. It's the kind of thing they said. He had a cold. We all watched that debate. Joe Biden was not capable of debating or engaging in a coherent way with President Trump.
And I think one of the things that you all really mention in the book is Harris and her attempt to distance herself from Biden, but trying to do that dance. And then we get to election night, and then looking back, is there a regret in how that was handled? Could you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think she and the president sort of had an agreement. He told her right before the presidential debate against Trump, no daylight, kid, and we report that for the first time. her aides had a different sort of agreement with his aides. They said, you can do what you need to do, you can distance yourself a little bit, but I think the two principals themselves were very much under an agreement that they would not move away from one another, and that did hamper her in a lot of ways, as we all know. And I think looking back in retrospect, she gets a lot of blame for not doing that. And for, we all saw this moment on The View, for example.
Yes, that's the moment where it became so clear, where she
Right.
says, yes, there's nothing I would have done differently.
Exactly. And that was a moment that was planned. They had rehearsed it. Meanwhile, her aides are kind of, backstage screaming about it. And no one really knew how that moment happened.
Did she think she was going to win, that she was running a successful, this media strategy of not distancing from Biden, not doing, she's taking a lot of flack now that we've seen the importance of alternate media platforms and ecosystems for Trump's appeal. Did she think the playbook she was running of just, I'm a different human being than Joe Biden, but I agree with him on everything, and I'm doing friendly media, I'm doing a couple kind of made to look genuine, podcasty type appearances that are not resonating well. Did she think this was going to result in her winning?
So the short answer is yes.
Wow.
She believed going into Election Day that she would win. Her campaign team told her that she was poised to win, even though their last analytics look at the race had her losing. But they had poised her, put her in the place where she thought she was going to win. David Plouffe, her senior advisor, was going out telling everybody who would listen that she was going to sweep all 7 swing states. When you talk about, did she think things were going right? I think what we found in reporting this book, I think what we concluded in reporting this book is that she didn't necessarily know any better. She's never run a national campaign like that. She had run in the primary in 2020 and
with that
been knocked
timeline.
out. Right.
Yeah.
Short timeline. She's basically pushed into keeping Biden's campaign team in place, because what are you going to do? Rip up the entire campaign structure in July. That has a cost to it. So she ends up keeping them in place. And there are ways in which you can distance yourself or show some daylight between the previous guy and yourself. And one of those ways is having a different agenda. Well, she took that off the table. Right? She's not able to say how she would do things differently. Then you're sort of left with, what's the character difference between these people and what's the record difference? Well, the record difference is she has the same record as him in the White House, and before that she had a much more liberal record in California. And we see that with the trans ad that was so effective for the Republicans. So now it's down to, I'm a different person than Joe Biden. You even heard her say that in a debate, right? How are you different? Well, we're different.
I'm literally
people.
different. Different molecules compose my body.
And different backgrounds and different family structures.
Sure.
And obviously different race. I mean, there's a lot of differences, but did she do a good job of...
But I think when she does, she has always said she doesn't want to be judged on race, gender, those kinds of things. But when she's left making that the only difference between her and Biden, in some ways it runs the risk of reducing her to those things, as opposed to the substantive difference on agenda and record. So I think she gets left running, only on the only contrast she has with Biden is those personal things. And I don't think that was right for the moment, where so many Americans were worried about their pocketbooks, right? Or in my case, a wallet, and in the kid's case, a paper clip holding together a couple cards and $1 or $2.
Let's talk a little bit about the Trump side of all of this. It seemed like they were kind of upset initially when, like, I thought we were running against Biden. They swapped him out. They can't do that. That's not fair. We were ready to beat him. How did they adapt to Kamala Harris being the candidate?
There was a little bit of panic going on right at that moment. Because you're right, they were winning. The reason why they had that debate earlier, the Biden-Trump debate, was to change the trajectory, because Trump was winning in polls. Turns out they're not winning anymore. It feels like it has shifted in Kamala's favor. And so he is wondering if he needs to start shaking things up, if they've gotten too comfortable. And so we report a lot about that in the book. There is a chapter with a curse word, which I won't mention on air.
This is YouTube. You can say whatever you want.
It's called
Awesome.
And we go into how there was on one side and on the other side.
Yes.
Former President Barack Obama, you touch on the delayed really support for then Vice President Kamala Harris. Talk a little bit about what that meant and the time delay and how much of an impact that did have.
So a couple different things here, right? One is certainly on Obama's part. She wants him once she's the Joe Biden picked candidate, once Biden gets out on that Sunday, she wants Barack Obama to come in behind her. She's got to lock down the delegates. Joe Biden has now basically released his delegates, and she has to go get them. Otherwise, somebody else might. They could have an open convention, mini primary open convention, and that's what Barack Obama wants. So she talks to Obama that day, and he is not ready to give his endorsement yet. And it ends up being a couple of days later, a few days later, the end of the next week, they put out this like cringy video. There was a whole miscommunication about why they were doing it on video instead of a statement. And the Obama people thought that's what Harris wanted, and the Harris people thought that's what Obama wanted. And it turned out that Biden's old campaign manager, Jen O'Malley Dillon, who is now running the Harris campaign, wants more money. And they're like, we can do viral clips and get some fundraising out of this because donors had choked off the Biden campaign in order to try to get him out. So they're hemorrhaging money. They're trying to make payroll, and they're like, we'll do a video. But the Obamas didn't want to get on video, and Harris didn't want to do a video with them, and so you get the product that you got. But the other part I want to say, sort of in the same vein, is when Biden gets out, we take the readers inside the vice president's residence, and he calls her to say he's getting out, and she says, "Are you sure?" And he says, I am sure." And then she says, "Are you going to endorse me?" And he says, "You got my support kit." And she's like, "No, that's not. I need your endorsement. I am your vice president. You told everybody else I was the next best person to be president. If you don't endorse me and do it quickly, it's going to look like
It's going to look bad.
It's going to look terrible.
Bad. Terrible, yeah.
And so they actually, and this has never been reported before, they actually had 2 phone conversations because she had to plead with him to make a quick endorsement, and he was like, it's a Sunday, he's like, I'm going to wait till like Thursday. Because what he wanted to do was take kind of a victory lap and say, I am this great patriot for the good of the country. I'm stepping aside from, we heard what he said from the White House later. He wanted to have several days for that to like percolate and bask in the glory of his, what he saw as his very selfless decision. I don't think anybody else really saw it that way, but he saw it that way. And she's like, this is a political disaster for me. Yeah. So they have 2 phone calls. Finally, she gets him to agree to endorse her on the same day, but he's still like, I'm going to do one statement getting out, and then later I'll do a statement endorsing you. And in the half hour or so between those 2 things, everybody in our business is like watching, going like, why the hell didn't he mention Kamala Harris? It's like, is he going to go rogue? And then she finally gets his endorsement, and then that sort of pushes her forward to be able to go lock down all the rest of them.
There's all this resistance. There's all this resistance, it sounds like, for the time pressure was there. That it's time sensitive. And did we even, you talk about Michelle Obama. You just talked about key players who didn't right away jump in. And so what was the main threat? What was the holdup?
So I think there are a couple of things. I think there were a lot of people at the senior level of the Democratic Party, whether you're talking about Barack Obama or Nancy Pelosi. I can't speak to Michelle Obama as much as Barack Obama, but they tend to move in tandem on politics, who didn't think that Harris was the best choice to run to be the presidential candidate. On the other hand, it is unfathomable to me, knowing what I know about the Democratic Party, that if Joe Biden got out, that the Democrats were going to skip over their vice president, the first black woman to be vice president. You've got a party that, where the delegates themselves were pledged to Biden. She was his wingman, his sidecar for this whole. There was just no way they were going to skip over her. And here's Obama, and he's still thinking, even as Biden gives this up, he's like, I'm going to get an open convention out of this. I'm going to get somebody other than Kamala Harris, to the point that he had set up a call with Jim Clyburn, the congressman from South Carolina, for 5:30 p.m. that afternoon. And Clyburn is watching all this stuff go on. Biden calls, says, I'm going to get out. Clyburn says, are you endorsing Harris? Or there's nothing about Harris in your statement. And Biden says, yeah, I'm going to leave my statement as it is, but I'll endorse her later. So Clyburn is like, I got to get my own statement out fast so that I've endorsed her before I talk with Obama, because he's going to try to rope me into some sort of open convention. So they eventually get on the phone at like 5:30, and Clyburn's like, I already endorsed her. You know, done. It's done. It's over. I've already endorsed her. We all need to get behind the vice president, or the party's going to be torn apart limb from limb. That conversation lasted less than a minute.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
It is really
Wow.
incredible.
So many nuggets.
Yeah, the extent to which this course of action was destined to take place, going back to what Biden's decision to run for re-election in the first place, despite giving the impression that he might be a one-term president. Let's put the book on screen one more time. It is Fight. It is so good. Thank you both so much for being with us. We really appreciate it, Jonathan and Amie. Up next, conservatives are turning against one of their own. We'll tell you who that is. Stay with us.